Well, good morning again.
Good
It's always
morning.
so wonderful to see you all. Thank you for the welcome. Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts with you this month and beyond.
Yes, yes, he's agreed to also stay on for the November month. So thank you. We just have that welcome from an affirmation from Reverend James. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I like to begin with some time of meditation. So, where the service begins in a meditative mood, and we'll just continue that for a time. I invite you to become comfortable still in this time together. We open our hearts and our minds to omnipresence, the omnipresence of spirit. Omnipresence means everywhere, no exceptions, no absence. Spirit is the life, the intelligence, substance that is limitless and is, again, everywhere present. So if you take a few moments to feel the presence of spirit, of that life force in our breathing. I like to observe my breathing. As I observe it, as I feel it, becomes calm and regular, as if life were breathing me. I am witnessing this life flowing not only in and out of my lungs. I feel the energy, that divine life of spirit, every part of my body, crown of my head to the soles of my feet. I experience the energy, the life that is spirit in this body, in every part of this body. Even the form of this body is omnipresence. Form of this body, the true form of this body is a divine idea, a divine mind, infinite mind has only perfect ideas. So I accept and witness this body as a perfect idea, meaning complete, harmonious, strong, filled with vitality, every part. Feel the warmth of divine energy in my fingertips, the soles of my feet, and my legs, all through my arms, all through my body. I feel that energy, that life that is spirit, presence in and as this body. I recognize at a deeper level divine presence as my feeling nature. That pure presence, the pure and perfect feeling of spirit, is peace and love and bliss. I invite this perfect feeling nature of spirit to fill me and radiate from me. I am a radiant center of divine peace. I am a radiant center of divine love. I am a radiant center of divine bliss. And I recognize, not just in the body, the radiance of this spirit of peace, love, and bliss omnipresence everywhere, all around me, filling the field of my consciousness, this field of my consciousness that encompasses my body, my environment, really the whole universe. From a particular perspective, this field of consciousness is the very omnipresence of God, of Spirit. The divine is present everywhere, in everything, and in everyone. So we hope when we open our hearts and minds to the omnipresence of Spirit, we recognize that presence is there in everyone we meet. And by seeing that, we help to draw it forth, to draw it into their consciousness. As others see the divine in us, it helps draw that consciousness for us. We recognize Spirit as intelligence, powers of understanding, of reason, of imagination, of wisdom. So when we open our hearts and minds to omnipresence, we are opening to limitless understanding, limitless creativity, perfect wisdom, guidance for every decision. This presence that is love and is wisdom draws to us and attracts to us all the good that we need. So we hold this for ourselves and others. Divine life harmonizes my body, makes me whole. Divine love and wisdom provides for my every need in abundance. Divine wisdom guides me. So we hold this for ourselves and for all others. We are grateful for this presence manifesting in us, as us, and through us throughout the world. We seek to be more open. We seek to allow the fuller expression of that divine radiance into our world. This is the Christ consciousness, and it is in the consciousness of the Christ, in the name and nature of the Christ, that we pray, believing and knowing is now unfolding, and we are grateful. And so it is. Amen. We gently bring our attention back to our surroundings, to the presence of others who are here with us right now in this time of spiritual community. See the bright, shining faces, the divine shining through everyone's eyes. We're grateful to be here and be sharing in this time of thoughtful reflection and perhaps some learning, we hope. So the topic for today is, how can I love myself? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said this commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself, is second only to the commandment to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He said the second commandment is actually like unto the first commandment, to love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. And the implication of this principle, to love your neighbor as yourself, is that we need to first learn to love ourselves and then have that same kind of love for others. So often we focus on the idea of loving your neighbor, but in order to truly do that, we need to understand what it means to love yourself, because we are to love our neighbors as ourselves, or like ourselves, if you will. So this is what I want to explore today. It's just what it could mean to love yourself. And that question, or answering that question, I believe, begins with an exploration of, well, what is myself? What is myself? So we're, of course, aware usually of our bodies. We're aware that we have feelings and thoughts. We have perceptions of the world around us. We have this field of consciousness, if you will, field of experience. It doesn't really have any limits, although our attention is generally focused in one place or another in the field, right? But the field, this field of consciousness, is filled with stuff, right? Including our bodies. Our bodies, in effect, are the center of this field of consciousness, but it's not, our bodies are not the only thing that is in the field of consciousness. And our bodies, of course, are constantly changing. Uh, my wife, Chris, was going through some old photographs the other day, and she found some pictures of me when I was in like college. And I didn't even, there's actually one picture where I did not even recognize that it was me. I had to ask her, well, who is this? Oh, that's you. Okay. All right. Our bodies change, right? Our appearance changes. Our consciousness changes. And this is all content of the field. The field itself never changes. The field of consciousness is what we recognize as the I of what I am. Right? Whatever else may change, I still have this sense of self, this sense of I, this which is this whole ever expanding, deep and wide and broad field of consciousness. So with the content of that field changes, the conditions change, our personalities change, our memories expand and come and go. A lot of times, maybe some of you experience that. And again, the whole universe is in our consciousness from the particular point of view that is generally centered in the body. It doesn't have to be centered there, but it usually is. Okay. So that's the closest we can get, I think, or closest I can get anyway, to understanding what myself is. And I noticed that this field of consciousness, this self, is not isolated, but in fact is interactive with the field of consciousness as it's seen from different points of view, which is to say, other beings, right? So there's this interconnectedness within the field of consciousness, but the field of consciousness is one. This is an important insight that we find, for example, in the teachings of the Upanishads, where God is self and self is God. This whole idea of the self is much more expansive than just our bodies and our personalities. We see the bodies and the personalities as simply content of the great field of consciousness of the I am. So, why is loving yourself like loving God? Because Jesus said the second commandment is like unto it. So, why is loving yourself like loving God? Because your field of consciousness, my field of consciousness, our field of consciousness is part of the universal field of consciousness that is God mind or God's spirit. Individual consciousness of the universe is God mind or spirit from a particular point of view. So you can say the infinite mind has an infinite number of points of view, of perspectives. And so this consciousness centered around this body is, one viewpoint within and inseparable from the universal field of consciousness. There is a divine unity in the universe. And our movement is aptly named because that's fundamental for us, this divine unity. And if I can refer back again just for a moment to the first commandment, remember that it begins, Hear, O Israel, the I am our God, the I am is one. And the word that's translated as one in Hebrew, the Hebrew word is echad, which actually means also unity. So God is unity, right? There is no separation of anything from the universe or anything in the universe. There's only sometimes an illusion of separation, which occurs when we falsely believe that the body is the self or the personality is the self, and that that body and that personality is somehow separate from the true self, the self that is God. So really loving yourself is loving God, at least in some sense. And so one way to frame this idea of love is to ask, what is good for? What is good for my children? What is good for my friends and family? What is good for me to love the self? We must ask the question, what is good for the self? Once we get a sense of, well, what is the self? It's this field of consciousness. And so what's good for consciousness is simply that which the consciousness experiences as good, right? So to love the self means to fill the consciousness with, or our experience with good, because the good that you experience, the good that I experience, that anyone experiences, is also a good that is shared with God mind. Shared with God mind. Think of that. In a sense, any good that you experience, any good that you bring into your life, is a kind of offering or a gift to God, in a sense, because we are sharing that experience of good with the universal consciousness. So loving ourselves and experiencing good in our own lives is actually one with, one might say, a divine experience of the universal consciousness, an experience of its own good, in a sense. So, what kinds of goods are there that we can bring into our lives? What are ways to love ourselves by, or love the self, if you will, by experiencing good? What are the goods that we can experience and have in our lives? In reflecting on this, we get a sense of, okay, how do I love myself? Well, I love myself and I love God by bringing into my consciousness and experience as much good as possible. I won't try to define good because I don't really think ultimately it is definable. I think it's we know it when we see it, right? We know it when we feel it. We know it when we perceive it. Now, I talked about first part of this series, doing what is mine to do, doing it what is yours to do. I think this is very basic to self-care, to loving the self, to do what is mine to do, to do what is yours to do. This is crucial for, lack of a better word, for success in life. And doing what is not yours to do leads to frustration and anger. There are some things that are ours to do from this sort of individual perspective, but there are other things that are not. And sometimes we try to do things that really aren't ours to do. And that, again, leads to kind of a sense of frustration. You can't really do what you can try to do what's not yours to do, but you can't really do that, right? So doing what is yours to do is in alignment with divine mind. It's the greatest, in alignment with the greatest possible good. One of the best pieces of advice I came across years and years ago was from Joseph Campbell, the writer on the meaning of mythology and the sort of Jungian interpretation of mythology. Campbell advised people to follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. That's what is yours to do once you discover what that bliss is for you. So that's part of how we love ourselves, is doing what is ours to do and not trying to do what is not ours to do. Another way of bringing good into our lives, into our experience, is to seek God consciousness. I consider this actually to be the highest good. And of course, so we talked about the idea of loving God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Loving God means is basically the means to know God, to experience God. And in a sense, or a way of looking at it, it is God experiencing God's self through us, again, through a particular perspective, God becoming self conscious, or God actualizing God's potential. There's a lot of different ways of looking at it. Um, German philosopher Hegel thought of the whole, or argued that the whole universe, the unfoldment of the universe, is the self becoming aware of itself as absolute, something along those lines. It's a very sort of complicated philosophy, but basically kind of comes down to God knowing God's self. That's what the universe, in effect, is. Hegelian philosophy. And I think that's fundamentally right. It's this search for God consciousness is really a search to be one, to be in unity with infinite life, love, light, bliss, power, all that we think of as God as being. So the highest possible good is to have that God consciousness. That's the sort of the goal of what we call the mystical path, this consciousness of union with God. So that's a way of bringing good into your life, is to pursue that. And of course, another means for that is the practice of meditation and prayer. The practice of meditation and prayer not only brings us into a higher awareness of the presence of God, but also has sort of positive physiological effects. And its effects has positive psychological effects. So we know this from studies. So the practice of meditation and prayer is a way of loving yourself, right? Not simply about, getting, obviously the important thing about becoming conscious of God presence, but and not just about experiencing healing or guidance or prosperity or whatever it is that we are seeking, but meditation, just the practice of it, is beneficial. And another kind of good that's sort of related to this is to seek inner peace, to seek, again, follow your bliss, find that peace. And this is an effect, I want to say. It's an effect to a great extent of meditation and prayer. It's certainly an effect of God consciousness, meditation and prayer, as I said, and also indicates self acceptance, or is characterized by self acceptance. So part of the way we love the self is to accept it as it is, right? Recognize it's not static. Our experience is not static. Our experience is unfolding and evolving. What what we truly are is the field of consciousness that has those unfolding experiences. To accept that through prayer and meditation, reflection, to find its inner peace and inner bliss, that's loving yourself, right? Loving the self. Love itself, loving and being loved, I believe, is what makes life ultimately meaningful. When people ask, well, what's the meaning of life? When we think about everything is interconnected. And so what the universe, when we think of the universe as sort of a oneness and an interconnectedness, that's the meaning. Everything that we study and think about ultimately leads back to that point of the fundamental unity of love, and the consciousness of unity, the feeling of oneness, is what love fundamentally is. And so loving and being loved is a way of bringing good into our experience, right? And so family, friends, relationships, social relationships, all those things are important ways that we love ourselves. And again, loving yourself is, in effect, loving God. Another thing that's important, I believe, for the experience of good is to have and expect respect and dignity. Respect and dignity. To be treated with, to treat others certainly with respect and dignity, but also to be treated yourself. This is a natural right. We sometimes may need to defend that right. If everyone is one with God, then everyone ought to be treated with respect and dignity that due to um, the simple ontological fact, the fact of being that everyone is one with God, everyone is, as we say, a child of God. If everyone is one with God, then we ought to treat everyone with respect and dignity, and we ought to expect that for ourselves. No one has a right to abuse you in any way. That, of course, does not stop some people from being abusive. So, part of self-love is to defend your right to respect and dignity. Um, I think that what are called, and I think I did a talk on this maybe months ago, um, what's called the teaching of non-resistance is really a teaching that is rooted in the idea uh, of, of, of respect, of being of respect and dignity. Well, I won't go off onto that tangent today, but my point really is that we have a right. You have a right to respect and dignity, and no one has a right to abuse that. And if they do, then you know have the right certainly to stand against that, to in whatever way you do, in whatever way is appropriate. To sometimes it's simply strategic withdrawal from the situation, right? A situation of abuse. Sometimes it is. Um, uh, Sometimes it might involve a sort of verbal self-defense, or it may even, in some situations, involve physical self-defense. Right? But we have that right, and in order to bring good into our experience, it's important that we expect to be treated with respect and dignity, and not allow others to in any way diminish that. Now, going on to another idea of good, an idea that's has a long history in philosophy and religion. That is the idea of the good as pleasure, or the good as joy. Right? A lot of times, that's mainly what people think of the good as being: whatever makes me happy, whatever gives me pleasure, whatever gives me joy. That's the good. And certainly, I think it's practically self-evident that it's better to experience joy and pleasure than it is to experience sorrow and pain, right? Physically and emotionally. So we have the right to pursue joy and pleasure. We have the right to do that. That's a way of loving the self and loving God, because the joy and pleasure that you experience are part of God consciousness, right? Because again, our consciousness is one. Cultivation of knowledge, knowledge of truth and wisdom as a means to other goods, as a part of knowing yourself, um, that includes meditation and prayer, but the cultivation of knowledge and truth and wisdom is a good. To be is a way of loving yourself, is doing that, right? We seeking knowledge and wisdom, however we might do that. That's a good to bring into our field of consciousness, into our experience, to love ourselves, to love God. And of course, there are things that are, most people think of in terms of, what is good, what is self-care. Well, you take care of your physical health, right? Take care of that, certainly through what you eat, through exercise and those sorts of things, receiving medical care, and also what we teach meditation and prayer as a means to physical health, which itself is a means, we need physical health to do what is ours to do. Going back to that point, to do what is yours to do, and to enjoy what is yours to enjoy, we must have physical health. And so that's a good, right? Even though we may think of, as I do, the body as an idea in mind and not the self, nevertheless, it's an idea that we experience. And so we want to experience it as good. We want to experience it as healthy. So the pursuit of health is a good. The pursuit of abundant supply. Abundant supply is a means to certainly to health. It's related to that. It's related to ideas of security and enjoyment, and also the possibility of sharing in our interconnectedness. To have an abundance means to have all that we need and more, and that more we can then share with others. Abundance means different things to different people. Evidently, I don't know if you'd read about this, but evidently for our current president in the United States, um, living an abundant life includes having golden toilets. Now, I don't know why that is something that is important to me, important to him. It certainly doesn't. It's not important to me. But again, different people have different ideas of what abundance means. And another thing that is worthwhile to pursue and love of the self is accomplishments. Whatever kinds of accomplishments are meaningful to you as you follow your bliss. Accomplishments, in accomplishing something, it brings us joy. It may expand our abundance. Our accomplishments also may help others have respect for us, certainly to have respect for ourselves. And of course, again, accomplishments, what an accomplishment is for you is linked to what is yours to do, what is involved in following your bliss. So everyone has a sort of individual, I want to say, idea or notion of accomplishment. Another thing that's good for loving ourselves is having an occupation. Now, occupation, um, I don't just mean jobs or careers, but also things like just entertainment, how you occupy your space time place, right? Occupation, we occupy space and time, not merely with a bodily presence, but with a consciousness presence. So we occupy space time, sort of our little area and duration. And how we do that is entirely up to us, right? It's entirely up to you how you occupy your time. So it may involve jobs, careers, hobbies, entertainment. These are all ways that we occupy space time. We have to occupy it, so we might as well do it in a way that's meaningful, that brings good into our experience. Um, and the things be, for example, cultivation of skills and talents as a means to supply and joy and so on and so forth. Now, the thing I want to point out is that the pursuit of some of these things can be excessive, right? One can have an excessive, be excessive, I should say, in pursuit of pleasure, power, ego glorification, and wealth, because an excessive pursuit of these things um, can obstruct us from sort of the higher goals of God consciousness, the higher goals, the greater things of love and respect and affection and so on. So these are fairly obvious points, um, and it's important to sort of be aware of this as we pursue our good, as we manifest our good, as we think about what is our good. Uh, an excessive pursuit of pleasure can lead up to certain kinds of problems, drug addiction, disease, bad relationships, loss of jobs and friends, and so on. So we know about how excessive pursuit of pleasure can be diminishing rather than expanding. Similarly, we can be excessive in the pursuit of power, for example, for those who find that as their bliss to have power, because the power can then become ego-centered and result in harms to others, which, according to karma, sort of comes back to us. Can lead to the animosity of others towards us. It can also, the excessive pursuit of power can lead to debilitating stress, neuroses, pathologies, paranoia, and sometimes assassination. Right. So, put it in another way, I've never read in history, I've read a lot of history, not read all of history, but I've never read in history that there was someone who was a tyrant and also beloved by the people. Have you ever read of a beloved tyrant? Uh, People may pretend to love a tyrant to avoid jail, to avoid torture, to avoid death, loss of position and property, and so on. But ultimately, that's not a sort of real love. That's just a fear. And then later generations and historians basically are, repelled by or feel disgust for tyrants. So the excessive pursuit of power can lead to all kinds of negative consequences. Similarly, with the pursuit of self glorification in any field, it can lead to, if it's excessive, it can lead to diminishment and harm rather than an experience of good. And we have this teaching of prosperity that sometimes turns into the idea that the wealthier we are, the more beloved we are of God. And so we're sort of excessive pursuit of wealth. That didn't begin with New Thought in a way. It began with the Calvinists. I'm not going to go into that. We'll just say the idea has been around for a while that if you're wealthy, then that means you're blessed by God, and so people pursue wealth, and that can be excessive. They might do dishonest things in order to become wealthier. They may commit crimes. Those crimes may ultimate in fines or jail. Wealth can be obtained ethically and used to benefit others. And so, of course, that would be a good use. Um, The extremely wealthy are often admired, but they're not generally admired unconditionally. They're nearly always detractors. Um, and some of those detractors, some of their criticisms are not unwarranted. People who uh, pursue wealth to sort of win the game for self glorification never have enough. So, in a sense, no matter how much they have, they're always in want. They always want more. There have been some who've left the business world sort of after building up a fortune to focus on giving that wealth away. It's a really sort of interesting phenomenon. Andrew Carnegie was an example of that. He spent the last 18 years of his life giving away approximately 90% of his wealth, which is obviously an extraordinary thing. He wrote a little essay called The Gospel of Wealth, which was very influential. Basically advocated for um, doing what he was doing after accumulating a certain amount of wealth, then giving that away to worthwhile causes. Carnegie advocated for progressive taxation, for philanthropy, for estate taxes. So other things that one might say were against his self-interest, and yet there is in this, this is a, what do I say, this is a good use of power, a good use of wealth, I mean, for the individual who's using it that way, as well as for others who might benefit from it. Well, anyway, because of the dangers of excessive pursuits that I've mentioned, mystics, in their wisdom, have often taught and practiced a kind of austere lifestyle, minimizing possessions, minimizing pleasures, and have often the mystics have often been mendicants, which basically means beggars, right? Mendicants, in other words, they survived by asking to be given to, right? Begging, in other words. In fact, the word in the saying of Jesus in the Beatitude that says, "Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of God." The word "poor" there actually literally means beggars. So in a sense, you could translate that: "Blessed are the beggars, for theirs is the kingdom of God." Right? So it's more than it's something different from our usual concepts of poor. Jesus is kind of in effect referring to his own lifestyle. And we need to add that from our unity interpretation of the Gospels, from what the Gospels say, Jesus also had a limitless prosperity consciousness, which is illustrated most famously by the story of the feeding of the 5,000 with fish sandwiches, starting with a few fish sandwiches. I don't know, they made it sandwiches, but bread and fish, right? So we also know about Jesus from his story that he attended parties where there was eating and drinking. Uh, we know that he enjoyed wine because he drank it, right? That was I assume anyway, for him humanly, that was a pleasure. And he certainly was not opposed to entertainment, to experiencing entertainment, because he himself was a master storyteller. In effect, he was an entertainer. I won't go into how Jesus's parables were entertaining. I'm just going to leave it at that point here. I could say also about Gautama the Buddha. He was also a mendicant and a storyteller like Jesus, and he also attended parties, although he probably didn't drink alcohol. And again, you see the same thing. These mendicants, these mystics, among the Hindu gurus, among the Sufis, and the Christian saints. This mystic attitude of minimizing and even avoiding common pleasures can really be summarized this way: the less you want, the more you will receive. Odd sort of way to summarize it, but that's the effect of it. The less you want, the more you will receive. Why would be the more is that which their ultimate pursuit is: the God consciousness, the ultimate consciousness of good, or as the Buddhists would call it, nirvana, right? The pursuit of nirvana. The less you want other things, the more you have, the more of this connection with the divine you have. Um, Henry Thoreau put it in a sort of amusing way. He said, "That man is richest whose pleasures are cheapest," right? So this idea of minimization of possessions and that sort of thing, um, it was part of a lot of the mystical teachings. But I have a sort of critique of that. It seems that these mystics were opposed to pleasure and abundance and worldly position and fame and even personal glory. And I think the mystics took these seemingly extreme positions as a kind of counter to the excesses that appear to be normal for the natural human egotistic drives, right? That can easily become extreme when unchecked or unbalanced. So I think the mystics lived their lives and taught as a way of as a kind of counterbalance to bring people to center, to enter into what the Buddha himself called the middle way, the neither extreme asceticism nor extreme self-indulgence, kind of middle path, a balance. And in Jesus' teachings, he actually did not put limits on what we can ask for, right? He simply said, ask, asking will receive. He countered the possible excesses of egotism by emphasizing love, making that central to his teaching. So this is the perspective that was picked up not often throughout history, but certainly in the period of the Transcendentalists and the emergence of New Thought. People like Emerson, Whitman, the Fillmores, Ernest Holmes, have picked up this idea of limitless abundance, right? And of course, the balancing factor of love, that those two things have to come together in order to achieve that balance. So this has become, one might say, a new paradigm for the mystical teachings. We can have our prosperity gospel, um, as it's called in the evangelical circles, and of course the evangelical circles really borrowed that from New Thought, right, from the New Thought metaphysicians and mystics. We can have this prosperity gospel of abundance and bring it into balance with the teaching of love, where we recognize the interconnectedness and the sort of central spiritual principles of love. Well, I believe you are all familiar with the practical unity teachings and principles. And so, as I am, and I always have to remind myself, one of the reasons I teach is just to keep reminding myself of these principles, to use them, to remember them. It's not enough just to know them. You have to use them, and it requires, reminding. So I'm going to remind you of just a few of them, again, sort of from the teachings of Jesus, as a way of closing this discussion, right? So one of the principles I've already sort of referred to: ask and you'll receive, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be open. This teaching is commonly interpreted as being persistent in prayer, and it certainly applies to that. And there's something more to it, or less, depending on how you look at it. But we can use these same principles in the context of the manifest realm. So not only in relationship to the divine source, but also in this realm of appearances or manifestation. We use this principle actually all the time. When we ask for payment for product or services, we receive. When we seek knowledge, we go to school or library or the internet, we find knowledge. When we knock on doors to visit others or apply for positions or sell products or get petitions assigned, when we knock, doors are opened. So, and this was fundamental to the life of the mendicant, right? To preach and also to ask, to receive. Another principle is give and it will be given to you, right? So as we give, what we are doing is expanding our consciousness of abundance. We're seeking to enter into that consciousness of abundance by having the idea that I have uh, even more than I need, and that I can therefore share from that, right? So it expands our sense of what we have, and it is in that expanded consciousness of abundance that we attract more. So give, and it will be given to you. And of course, the idea of faith: believe, and it will be done for you. Whatever we accept as true, um, whatever we accept as true is what we believe. And what we believe, what we accept as true, is identical with what we experience, right? So we have these teachings on ways to develop beliefs, to create experiences, affirmative prayer, our self-help books and classes, the use of visualization. So we have these principles to bring good into our lives. They are about loving ourselves. They're also about loving God. When you love yourself, you are also loving God because there is no separation. So, verily, verily, I say unto you, love yourself. Seek God consciousness because that is the highest good and the source of all good. Seek to experience what is yours to do and the good that is yours to experience. And remember that the good you choose to experience is a gift to God mind. For your true self, your field of consciousness is one with that God mind. Thank you and blessings.